I was diagnosed with a rare case of global transient amnesia, which usually lasts 4 to 6 hours, and you completely lose the ability to form new memories. When I recovered 24 hours later, I realized my body was telling me something my mind had rejected, which was I was in the wrong place with my life, and I needed to make some changes.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. Sometimes a conversation under a mango tree can change the course of your life. For Marcia Heath, that moment sparked a creative transformation that led to a book, a documentary, and a total rewrite of what success looks like for her. Marcia is a writer, editor, and former corporate consultant who once believed she was living the dream until her body literally hit pause. A sudden bout of transient global amnesia jolted her off the fast track and onto a very different path, one that ultimately led her to Aruba, where a chance encounter introduced her to two surf shop owners with a philosophy that changed everything. In this episode, we talk about the unexpected wisdom found in simplicity and how two low-key surf shop entrepreneurs built a thriving 20-year business by putting fun, friendship, and community first, and how Marcia went from editing and developing other writers' stories to finally telling one of her own. We dig into her book, Little Giant, the documentary it inspired, and the joy she discovered by doing things totally differently this time around. So if you've ever experienced burnout by chasing someone else's version of success, this conversation is your invitation to reset. Because sometimes rewriting your story starts by listening to someone else's. All right, Marcia Heath, thank you for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today.
I'm glad to be here. Very excited.
You've got a fun story, and when I saw your profile and your bio, I was like, wow, that fits so well with the theme of this podcast, because so much of what we talk about often is that theme of reinvention. And you've had that in your own life. You've seen that with other people, and you've even written a book. And the book itself is really interesting because it's a memoir, but you're not the central star of the show in that memoir. So I want to talk a lot about that, but I wanted to just dive into what got you here, because you were going along, you were doing the thing you thought you were supposed to be doing. And it sounds like you had a little burnout, perhaps, and you had some other setbacks along the way, but that led you on this adventure that opened your eyes to what life could be if you just take a different direction. And that led to this book. So take us back to where this adventure began for you.
I think I had a long ramp to writing this book, and I always thought I would write a literary novel and never expected I would become fascinated by a story about two surf shop entrepreneurs, very maverick guys, and a story about their surf shop in the Caribbean. I just never would have predicted it coming from the New England and a corporate background. But I think the first step toward this path was when I had a case of what's called transient global amnesia. And it's a very rare situation. It affects people usually 50 to 70 years old. And it happened when I was at my quote unquote dream job a few years ago, where I had just gotten a job and a promotion, small consulting firm. I got to ride my bike to work. I could look at a park from my window. I thought, gee, this is just a perfect job for me right now. Yet it was a very raw corporate environment, and I wasn't into that. And I just felt increasingly disconnected and hollowed out from the job. But I kept plugging along, thinking this was my path. This was what I'm supposed to do. And one day on a Saturday, my husband came home from an errand, and he saw me. Now, this was the height of summer in Florida on a Saturday. And I kept saying, you got to take me to work. I'm late. Take me to work. And just babbling over and over the same question. So he took me by the arm and raced me to the emergency room, where I spent overnight, and I was diagnosed with a rare case of global transient amnesia, which usually lasts 4 to 6 hours, and you completely lose the ability to form new memories. You know who you are and you can follow commands, but you don't know what year it is or where you live. I didn't recognize my husband. So it was a complete blackout. And when I recovered 24 hours later, I realized my body was telling me something my mind had rejected, which was I was in the wrong place with my life and I needed to make some changes. So that gave me a perfect exit strategy for my job. I was able to say, this happened. I want to be fully present for this job, but I can't be. So I started my own company and I worked with artists telling their stories. And then even that became self-limiting because I was always a shaper of other people's stories, not a teller of my own. And I come from traditional publishing where I was an editor, again, a ghost. I was an editor, you're never front stage. And after COVID, the shift, going ahead a little bit, my husband and I flew to Aruba to reset after the kind of disconnection that came and loneliness really that came from COVID. And I had a random conversation under a mango tree that got me going on this book. And the conversation was with the co-founder of the surf shop. And he said something that just went bing in my head. I had this scalp tingling moment where I thought, this is the story I need to write about, which didn't make any logical sense. But I just knew I had to write about this surf shop that was a renegade microcosm of how to live a happier, joyfully rebellious life. And so that was impetus for the story. And that was 3 years ago. And now it's a book and a documentary. I just got back from Aruba where we shot the last footage of the documentary. And I got to be in the surf shop and I got to do interviews with the two guys that are founders. And it was the most incredible experience.
That's fantastic. And the name of your book is Little Giant, the story of Aruba's surf shop and the rebels who built it.
Right.
And when you were under that mango tree, you went to Aruba to just recharge. And it sounds like you did, both creatively and maybe emotionally and physically, I guess, too, because your body had stored a lot of that tension from your job, the business that you were running after that. What did you hear under that mango tree that sent you running off in this direction?
The co-founder happens to be my late in life stepson, David Putnam. And I asked him, how did you do Bula Surf Shop during the pandemic? Because Aruba was really hard hit by the pandemic. Many shops went under because it's a tourism economy. So I was bracing myself for him to say, well, we kind of survived. It was really tough. He said, Yair and I, his co-founder, and I are still best friends. This is 20 years in. We are having so much fun and Bula is doing fine, just great. And I thought, this is a mystery. How did this little shop, born from a shoestring budget, survive 20 years, let alone thrive through a pandemic, a recession? Why are they so happy? And why am I not happier with the good life I supposedly have? So I had to solve the how done it of the surf shop, and then the why of their happiness became my quest for the book.
Oh, yeah. So that led to a lot more conversations. It sounds like you were in search of the secret sauce once you heard about their success, which to you was joy and happiness. You saw how happy they were, and then you immediately realized, oh, that's what success really looks like, and that's what I want. But because before you were measuring it to how you had a nice window view from your office, you could bike there. It was really nice, and those were the things you measured the success against. And so many of these conversations on this podcast is talking about what we thought success would look and feel like. And then when it doesn't match up, we have to do that rebellion thing where we figure out what's the programming I've had up until now and how do I need to change that? And how do I need to change myself in order to experience the joy? So when you got this kind of like a light bulb moment and you're under that mango tree and you realize this is the direction you needed to head, what was your next conversation with them like, where you really started to try to peel back what made this thing work for them?
I remember that same day we had dinner together. So David and his wife and Yair and his wife. And it was fresh fish that Yair had caught in his fishing boat off the shores of Aruba. And everyone was having a great time. And I interrupted the festivity by saying, I really want to write a book about you and the surf shop. They looked at me like, what are you saying? And they did not want this book. It's the opposite of a typical business book that's a disguise for braggery. They didn't want or need the publicity. They're very private. They're super happy doing what they're doing. And here I am, the stepmother of one of them saying, I'm going to walk in your world for 2 years. I'm going to ask you thousands of questions. I'm basically going to make your life hell for 2 years to write this book. And so begrudgingly, they said yes, because I was so determined and stubborn. But they secretly got together afterwards and said, she will never write this book. She won't finish it. Because I had not finished 20 odd other books. So why would I finish this one?
Okay.
They were placating me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we see how that went.
Yeah.
All right. So they say, okay, we'll go along with this, and it probably won't see the light of day. But now you just wrapped filming of a movie. How do they feel about it this many years removed from it?
It's been 3 years. Then I had to say to them, we just got funding, seed funding from partners in Aruba to do your story as a documentary film. And again, it was like I hit them over the head with the worst punishment because they're not particularly good on camera, not comfortable interviewing. So that took some coaxing and some very bad language off set. But I think they got into it because the whole community rallied around this documentary, and they were able to sit up from their own daily stuff and see the impact and the legacy of the surf shop on the people. We not only interviewed them, but we interviewed 20 other people on the island and internationally, journalists and artists and musicians they had sponsored, to say, how is this third place where you have a place outside of your home or work where you can go and hang out? How has this affected the community? And people just had flocked to the documentary and said the most amazing things. So I think they're secretly happy now.
Okay. Yeah, they were shown kind of the mirror of what they've created in the community, which was more impactful than them having to figure out the whole ego part of being exposed or whatever that felt like. They realized it was bigger than them.
Yes.
It sounds like what you're describing. That's fantastic. And I'm sure that made them realize that even though they're having a blast, they're also creating a lot for other people. What was it that you discovered that they do? Why were they having so much fun for so long? I grew up at the beach, so I think that automatically made me not too much of a beach person. I took it for granted. Now I live inland. So if I go to the beach, I can hang out there for a day or two and not feel like just wasting away and itching to get back and get things done in my normal life. But what did two guys, they start a surf shop and they're in it for the better part of 20 years, still having a blast. What are they doing?
I think it goes back to how Malcolm Gladwell, the author of Tipping Point and other books, described good work or a good job. And a good work or good job has three things. It has autonomy, it has challenges and struggles you can overcome, and it has validation. In other words, you see the results, the reward of your work. And these two guys never thought they'd get that from a surf shop, because when I think of surf shop, I think of the billboards in Florida, the big chains, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where you buy your t-shirt and you buy your sandals and then it's no, whatever. But this is more like a boutique and a Caribbean lifestyle shop with custom fixtures, wood fixtures, and a hangout place for families, not just surfers. They sell maybe a surfboard a month. What they really sell are Yeti coolers that are, by the way, the lowest priced Yeti coolers in the world. So 20 years in, they're still really excited about going to work. They used to surf every day before work and show up with sand between their toes. Now they're solidly in place at the shop, and every day is challenging. And they keep constantly tinkering with the recipe of the shop and making it better and better. They're not complacent. And they have each other to fall back on when things go wrong. And they always go wrong in a business. Employees don't show up. They're drunk. They're on drugs, whatever. They've had tons of problems. But they have each other, and they believe in the mission of this place, which is to serve the community, especially locals in a tourism economy, and have cool stuff there and to be friendly to everybody. That's it.
You dipped into that life for a couple of years while you were writing the book. Now, once the book was on the shelves and you did some book tours and you're still doing the marketing for the book, and then you'll do that for the documentary, what did you come away with after being immersed in that life for so long?
again, it was a surprise to me because I thought originally I would show off my marketing and business strategy mind in this book by saying they may be small, but they're doing a ton of things right. They may be renegades, but they really thought through their values, all this stuff. But what really happened was I began to see the human DNA of this business and how these two guys had wisdom about keeping things simple, which I've never done. I'm an overcomplicator. Savoring the moment. They're not beach people, but they savor the moments they can. And basically not hustling so much. I've always been a big speed queen. Have a to-do list, knock it off, get to the next project, knock that up. And this has taught me to slow down and focus on more right-sized on what I can do in my life, what's left of it. And it's really changed me for the better. I've never been happier than this moment in time, ever.
Oh, that's fantastic. And sometimes it takes one of those conversations under a tree, and in the matter of a moment or two, everything changes and you don't realize it yet. But then you start moving forward, you take that next step into a project. You don't know where it's going to go. And like you said, everyone else thought, okay, this is going to be something to keep you occupied for a little while, but it may not amount to much. What was it about this project that was different from all of the other manuscripts you've started in the past?
At the very beginning of this project, I said to myself, whatever habits you had before about writing a book have not worked. So let's do a George Costanza from Steinfeld. You know that show, The Opposite? I think it was 1994 or 6, where George goes into a coffee shop and he says, Jerry, nothing is working in my life. I'm going to just do everything in reverse. So he orders a different sandwich. He tells this beautiful woman that he's unemployed and living with his parents. And he gets a job at the Yankees because he's honest. So he flips the script. And I said, I need to flip the script here in order to do this book. I made the commitment to them, even though they don't care about it. I can't disappoint them, and I don't want to disappoint myself. So number one habit was, in the past, I would squirrel myself away in my little office and not tell anyone I was writing a book. I wait for the solitary genius to show up, which of course it never did. And instead, I told people I was writing a book, and I joined a writer's group, and I got a coach because it was way over my mitt to figure out the book with so many angles to it and layers. And I came from traditional book publishing. So that was very humbling for me to say, I'm a rookie here. I need help finishing this book. So I did that, and I didn't wait for inspiration. I just sat down at 5:30 every morning and I started typing. And I trusted the process more. I figured that I would have to write a lot of awful stuff before I found the story, or the story found me in this case. And so that's what I did. And I did that for 2 years. And I slimmed back my consulting clients so that I could do this book, not as a gig, not as an ego project or a hobby, but as a full-on bona fide project that I could commit to as a person, as a writer, as a creative person. And God damn it, I finished it.
You
Thank
did.
goodness.
And when you held that final copy in your hand, when you got the box, because I've had that experience, you get the box. And by that time, you've been through it. With that book, you've read it 10 times. Other people have read it and given you notes. You've made the changes, and then you get it back. How did you feel when you got that first box of the final copy?
To be honest, not that great. I know that everyone always says they feel overjoyed, but when it finally came, I felt relief for sure. But that external validation of having a physical book in my hand faded very quickly. And I think what really has kept me going with this book is how other readers have responded to it. Elizabeth Gilbert writes in Big Magic, she wrote Eat, Pray, Love, that when you write a book and you send it out in the world, it becomes the reader's world, not yours. It becomes their possession, not yours. And so I really thought about that. And any joy I get from the book is less about my writing it or finishing it, and more about how other people are reacting to it.
That's so powerful for anyone to hear who is thinking about going that direction. I talk to people all the time that say, I would love to write a book. I have a story. I've got a ton of stories. I would love to do it. And I'm very encouraging to say, hey, do it. Or I'll send them, hey, listen to this podcast episode. We've got someone who breaks it down step by step. And I've had the experience of doing that, which is why I said, once you get through all of those different versions, those revisions, those things, and you've lived with it maybe a little too closely for your own comfort for a little too long, and you think it might be driving you crazy, and then you finally see the finished copy, I've had that experience where like, cool, they're here, they're not damaged. Great, let's move on with the next thing. There's not that feeling of, oh, accomplishment, joy. You don't hold it up and, yay, this is the shining moment. The shining moment was for me when I hit go on the upload to the publisher. Then for me, I was like, okay, now I'm done. Now I can just take a minute to rest and move on with the next thing. And that's pretty in line with what I've heard from other folks. It's like they're ready to experience something else and also excited to hear what other people have to say about what they've written. That is always the fun part, isn't it?
It is. And I just have two thoughts on what you just said when you said you got joy from finishing it.
Yeah.
I think there is a tremendous mastery you feel when you actually complete a marathon of a project or finish a marathon physically. There's that feeling of great satisfaction that you went through something very difficult and now you're at the finish line. And Robert Greene wrote a book called Mastery, and he talks about the joy of mastery. It's not typical external validation joy, but the joy you have within yourself of having actually completed something you never thought you might have completed. And I think that's really true.
I also love, and I really want to point a big neon sign to what you were saying before we got into this, which is you made an intentional decision to do the opposite of what you had been doing before. And something that I love to talk about on this podcast, and I talk about it when I'm journaling, and I try to keep it top of mind, is that saying nothing changes if nothing changes. And when you made that conscious decision to say, okay, I'm not going to sequester myself. I'm not going to keep this a secret. I'm not going to hang around waiting for my muse. Things started happening. You started taking different kind of action. It sounds like it did, but I just want to ask, did that action when you got going, did that create the motivation that kept you rolling to the end?
I don't know if the word I would choose would be motivation.
Okay.
I'd say it was accountability.
Okay.
So accountability to myself, have coffee first and foremost, and then head to my little writing desk area. And then accountability to other people in the writing group and also my writing coach. That was so important because I was always the one, I will not show anyone a thing until it's good.
Yeah.
And I would have waited a long time to show anything that was any good about this book. And I got over that perfectionism because I had caring, generally interesting people to help me along the way. So I think accountability is what kept me going forward more than other kinds of motivation.
That's really good though, because you had a team. Part of the team was the writing group. Part of the team was your writing coach. And it sounds like you knew enough about yourself, how you'd worked in the past, that you needed those things in place to get this thing to the finish line. So that's really important. One of the biggest themes we talk on the podcast is about awareness. So if you're aware that, okay, I've done it this way every other time, and I probably should try something else, then if you're aware that you react really well to accountability, you can put systems in place to make that happen. So you talk about the joy that you're experiencing now in your life. What changes did you make when you came back from that trip in your own life? Maybe did you change anything originally, like when you had that original flash of inspiration and you saw how happy they were, but maybe you got yourself busy with the book at that point, and then through the course of what you learned writing the book, did you make any changes in your own life that have brought you this joy that you're experiencing now?
I think the first thing I did when I got home after I told these two guys I was going to invade their lives for 2 years was to give up on my other project. Or I was writing that book I mentioned, but I was also on a quest to learn about happiness, ironically. So I'd studied the neuroscience of happiness during COVID. I consulted with experts. I even thought of going to an Atlantic Monthly seminar on how to be happy. And wanting to be happy made me more unhappy because I had this expanding list of to-dos. Okay, plan an organic garden, give up caffeine, learn Portuguese, whatever it was. I had this idea I was failing and I was always taking my temperature. Am I happy? Am I not? So I decided after seeing these guys who were somewhat organically happy without any academic interference, I would just give up on that and adopt their principles. So their principles for my writing project was have fun. If you're going to write, you might as well have some fun doing it if this is what you've chosen to do. Stay good friends, and then do good, serve somebody, serve the community, serve other readers. And that's really a great formula for life. Now, you don't have to start a surf shop or even want to run a business. And these are values that transcend almost any dream, in my opinion. So that's what I did. And when I stopped having fun writing, I would go walking, or I'd call my son, or I would listen to podcasts or music. And I tell you what, that made such a difference to me. It kind of released my analytic, critical mind. And even if it's not the best in the world, it's the best I can do right now. So there you go.
There's a lot in there that we could unpack, but the biggest thing, and it's the thing you said first, is, and I've heard this from so many people, that the search for happiness has created the opposite. I've had that experience. I've read a lot of books, maybe not the academic ones, but a lot of them. And it did have the opposite effect. But also the thing I noticed is they all say similar things. They say, once you decide to be happy, you can incorporate certain things into your life and it will happen. The big key is there once you decide. And it sounds like you decided to adopt kind of their framework into your life, and it started creeping in. It's just, you got happier and happier by doing these other things, but not by pursuing happiness itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that one quote really cemented why I was unhappy before and became evolutionarily more happy afterwards, which was John Stuart Mills, who said that, this is paraphrasing, if you want to be happy, don't focus inwardly on yourself or your desires, but focus on an external project or a person or an idea that you can really have a purpose around and feel happy about. So once I got through my self-centeredness and got this project going, it became my stepping stone to being much more happy, because it was beyond my ego. It was something I was doing for them and for the community and for potential readers. And that made all the difference.
That's probably the most powerful thing from this conversation. And I would love to hear some of the feedback that you've gotten from the book, people who have read it and they said, oh my gosh, I thought it was going to be this, and turned out I got all these other things from the book. Do you get comments like that?
Yeah, and I have to tell you that, James, that seeing these comments pop up of people I don't know, they aren't my friends or family, they're strangers who say the most incredible things. I think that the people who are reading this are not the people I thought would read it. I thought surfers would read it, and they are. I thought entrepreneurs read it, and somewhat. But really, it's people who just like a good story, who have no interest in retail or surf shops intrinsically, but found sort of life tips by reading it. And they love the humor and the fact these guys were very self-effacing, and that I was pretty full of foibles myself and how I narrated. So I just think it's a good tale. We set in the Caribbean with beautiful pictures. That doesn't hurt, right?
Yeah. No one's mad about that.
Oh, and then probably the most wonderful thing anyone said was that compared to Tuesdays with Morrie. Now, I don't know if you remember that book that came out years ago.
I do. I read it pretty recently, like in the last year and a half, actually.
All right. So what would you say the essence of that book is?
Well, the essence of that book is...
Or what is it about?
It's just about people. It's about connection, and it's about people. Yeah. And people's connection with each other, and the fact that sometimes you can transcend age, you can transcend family, you can transcend a lot of different things that our society calls what you should be connected by. And then you can transcend that just by two people sharing a connection with each other.
That's beautiful. That's fantastic. And the fact that the narrator goes to see his professor and they talk every time about a theme, like you said, family, humor, spiritual stuff. It's such a beautiful platform for exploring life issues and going away feeling like you have a jetpack of inspiration and maybe a little compass for your own life after reading it.
Yeah, that's really fun. I hadn't thought about it that way. When you did get back and you got back to work on that book and you were in the trenches of it, so to speak, what did you have to keep reminding yourself? Because you had a lot of pressure before that in your job, in your life, that got your body to redirect you. When you got into this project, how did you have to remind yourself to keep that balance? I heard you say when you weren't having fun anymore, you would go for a walk or do a podcast. Is that what you had to do? I've heard of people literally having to set a timer for themselves so they remember to get up, drink some water, move around. What were your levers for making sure you kept some work-life balance?
I'm not good at work-life balance. I'm still not. So please don't think I'm an expert on this, but I will say that one of the great results of writing this book is I went back to playing classical piano, which I had somewhat ditched at the time I had the global amnesia because I had a really bad recital. And I thought, I stink at this. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm never going to play again. So during the book, I adopted the idea of what the Bula Surf Shop guys did, which is life is one big experiment. It's improvisation. No one really knows all the answers. You don't need the whole map in front of you. You just need to get to the first intersection. So I kept thinking about how do I get to the next intersection? And when I couldn't get there, I saw no way, I would play the piano. And I got a new teacher. And because I was writing this book and I felt more creatively fulfilled than I ever had been, I started taking lessons again. I actually performed again. I started performing, and that opened up a whole creative world that I had self-limited myself. I prevented myself from going there before the book. So that was another outcome of writing the book. It gave me the confidence to say, I don't have to be a concert pianist on a global stage. I can just really enjoy playing for people.
Yeah.
And that was totally new for me.
Wow. Yeah. So in a completely different way, but you were able to get away from the book writing for a little bit. You were able to exercise a different part of your mind and your creativity, and that folded into what you were doing with the book. And I would love to backtrack just a little bit because you said something a little earlier. We went off in a different direction, but it's something that I've had a really difficult time with myself. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about it. But you said when you came back and you made a commitment to write this book, and one of the first things you did was you stopped all of your other ongoing projects. How did you decide exactly what you were going to stop? And what was that feeling like when you said, okay, I'm going to put this on the shelf for X number of years or whatever it was? How did you go about picking and choosing?
If I think about what I stopped writing that book that was not going anywhere fast, the literary novel. I also said no to clients, new clients for my consulting business. And I kept one major client whom I just love working with. They're very creative and it's just a great relationship to keep the money flow. A lot of my clients dropped off a little during COVID, so I didn't have to walk away from them. They already had walked away.
Yeah.
So there was that. And then the other thing is the whole friendship thing. I decided that I would prune my friendships to write the book. So I had many acquaintances that I would see, although I called them friends because I had longevity with them. And I decided I'm not going to socialize with people who don't bring me fun and joy. So I pruned back in that area of my life too. And I became a better friend to my real friends. And so that sustained me during this whole process because they often saw the power of what I was doing before I could. And they'd say, just get over yourself. Just keep going. You've got something good going on there. I can't tell you how wonderful that was to reconnect with my dear friends. And it was all the result of listening to their values. Stay friends, have fun, and serve the community. That's it. It's so brilliant.
I love the fact that you didn't just add this project to your plate. You added a writer's group. You added a writing coach to your life. But then you also had the wisdom to see, okay, there's only so much of me to go around, so I need to subtract some things. And that's the thing I've been guilty of sometimes when I get excited about something, I'll just add it. And then the hardest part is figuring out, okay, where do I block this on the calendar? Because when I go through that exercise, then it becomes real and I have to allocate some time to it. And then I say, oh, my calendar's pretty full. Where does this go? Then I have to ask myself the question, am I really serious about this? Because if I'm not going to give it as much as it deserves, should I even bother? And there are some times when I've realized I needed to prune some things that have just been going a little by little. I've got 2 or 3 of those that I've just had to say, you know what, I'm not serious about this. So I'll shelve it for now. If it comes back up, then I'll need to decide if I'm going to make it a priority. I'm so excited that we had this conversation because it went a million different directions, but it's all about what you learned and how that affected your life. There were so many great nuggets in there. What's the best way for people to get a hold of the book and get in touch with you to learn more, and also get on a list to find out when this documentary is coming out?
It's pretty easy. So my book site is called littlegiantbook.com. And if you go on that and subscribe, then you'll get all the notifications about the documentary and all the insider scoop.
Okay.
And also, I just came out with a free guide. It's called Build Your Own Dream. And it's very short, but it distills a lot of the life tips that I gained and others might gain from writing this book.
Oh, that's great. On the other screen, I've got your website up, and I'll have all of that info in the show notes so people can just click right there and get to you quickly. And is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would love to talk about or highlight?
I think that people might wonder, okay, that's great what you said, but do I really want to read a book about a surf shop and a retail business? And I would say that it's really a story about finding your way and building a life that's meaningful to you. And it's fun. It's a pretty fun read. And sometimes we judge a book by the cover, but also the title. These two guys, 20 years before the people did digital nomading, did something extraordinary with their lives by saying, what do I want to do with my life? Rather than having society tell me.
That's really powerful because I just did a podcast earlier this morning with a person who is a digital nomad. That's what he does now. And he is in Bali and he does coaching to help other people who are in high pressure jobs or whatever the situation to figure out how they can take the steps to become digital nomads themselves. And that's his life now. So it's very timely. But in regards to the book, people want to read stories that inspire them and also allow them to escape a little bit. So if someone is doing that 9 to 7 o'clock at night job and they want to find out what it's really like to just say, no, I'm going to do it my way, I bet they would get a lot of insights from your book.
Yeah, and you don't have to go to a tropical island and start a shop to find your dream. It can be quite a small first step, and you don't need the whole map in front of you. That's what I learned. I took some small steps with this book, and look where it took me. Good places.
Marcia, thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to get this out and hear what people have to say. And I am looking forward to getting a copy of your book and diving into this story myself.
Thank you very much for this conversation.
Thanks for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this content and are thinking about ways to share your story or even get more joy out of your life, I have a free ebook that I'd love to share with you. It's called Plotting Your Joyful Rebellion, and I designed it to be a 5-step field guide full of guerrilla warfare tactics to help prepare you to overthrow any of the parts of your life you feel the call to rebel against. Go to ajoyfulrebellion.com and click on the link right there at the top to claim your free copy of the book. Again, that's ajoyfulrebellion.com, or simply hit the link at the top of the show notes. What sort of rebellion are you plotting right now? I'd love to hear about it. Connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or through the website at ajoyfulrebellion.com. Thanks again for listening today, and be sure to stop by next week for another episode full of joyful rebellion.